Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel, and in this video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous 12 hours. We have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about China, where a meeting between President of Russia Putin and leader of China Xi Jinping started. Putin arrived in China yesterday, and this is exactly the moment when Putin was greeted and welcomed by Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi. Chinese and Russian flags are proudly waved. The meeting between Putin and Xi Jinping started this morning on the 20th of May of 2026, and both leaders have already made lots of very interesting statements, and both leaders have already published and signed lots of very interesting documents. Our cooperation in foreign policy affairs is one of the main stabilizing factors on the international stage. We defend cultural and civilizational diversity and respect for the sovereign developments of states, striving to build a more just and democratic world order. In the current tense situation on the international stage, our close coordination is especially needed. Another important thing is that Putin and Xi Jinping signed a statement on strengthening comprehensive partnership and strategic interaction. The leaders of Russia and China adopted a declaration on the establishment of a multipolar world and a new type of international relations. Russia and China agreed on energy projects and other very important matters, said presidential aide Ushakov. Another important thing that Russia stated that relations between Russia and China are a model for how relations between countries and people should be built today, says Putin. So as we can see, this is a very interesting and a very important meeting, and now we can say for sure that both the Russians and the Chinese are backed by each other, and this is a very important situation when talking about possible conflict in Iran and when talking about the conflict on the territory of Ukraine. And as for Ukraine and as for the European countries, we know that the meeting between China and Russia is not something that they will like. So that is why during the previous night, while the meeting in China, the Ukrainians were attacking the territory of Russia using hundreds of drones. And the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation this morning stated that between 8 p.m. and the 7 a.m. of the 20th of May of 2026, the Russians intercepted and destroyed 273 drones of the armed forces of Ukraine. Later, the Russians added that between 7 a.m. and 9 a.m. the Russians destroyed additional 61 drones over the territory of the Russian Federation. But at the same time, this morning and during the previous night, we received lots of videos of Ukraine's drones over the territory of Russia. We have a video from the territory of the city of Moscow. As of now, it's very difficult to say, and the sources haven't reported whether the Ukrainians attacked this object of energy infrastructure or there was just an explosion that happened due to some consequences or due to some things and events that happened in the city of Moscow, not related with the situation in Ukraine. Anyway, we have a very huge explosion and a very big fire broke out from this territory after something happened. Maybe this is the consequences of the Ukraine's drone attack, maybe something else. But we report about the situation because this is a very important thing. And according to the author of this video, a warehouse was destroyed as a result of attack. Also, lots of drones were recorded a bit further to the east in the area of the settlement by the name of Kostovo. And if you take a look at this picture, you may see a Kostovo oil refinery, something big, a very big facility, and this facility suffered the biggest attack from the Ukraine side. And during the night, we received this video where we can see dozens of drones of the armed forces of Ukraine that were moving in the direction of the Kostovo oil refinery. And during the night and this morning, we received lots of videos on this matter. Here we have another Ukrainian drone that was directly attacking this Kostovo oil refinery. Here we have another video with the Ukrainian drone that was flying over the city of Kostovo or over another settlement heading towards this oil refinery. And for example, here we can see how the Russian air defense forces were working. But despite the fact that the Russians were trying to destroy all these drones, we see that it seems there were too many of these drones heading towards this oil refinery. And as a result of this attack, this oil refinery probably was damaged, or at least some blocks or facilities were damaged, and probably damaged significantly. So this is the situation in the area of the city of Kostovo. We have this video with drones, and we have this picture that some object on the territory of this enterprise was probably damaged. The second area that was attacked by the Ukrainians is the southern direction. During the previous night, we received lots of videos from the territory of the settlement of Snezhna. This is the Donetsk region, and according to information we have, the Ukrainians attacked a warehouse or an ammo depot. In this video, we can see the consequences of attack. The entire building was reduced to ruins, and the author of this video claims that the Ukrainians attacked an ammo depot on the territory of the settlement. Few more drones were recorded further in the southeastern direction in the area of the settlement of Nevinomysk. This city was attacked by the Ukrainians several days ago, and as for several days ago, the Ukrainians were attacking the Nevinomysk or chemical plant. And in this video, we can see a fire on the horizon. As of the morning of the 20th of May of 2026, this is the only video we have about the situation in this area. So that is why, as of now, it's very difficult to say whether the Ukrainians managed to hit hard this chemical plant, or we can see just the consequences of the Russian air defense work. Because in this video, we can see how the Russians were trying to bring down Ukraine's drones that were flying in this area with air defense systems. During the night between the 19th and the 20th of May of 2026, the Russians also attacked the territory of Ukraine, and the Minister of Defense of Ukraine this morning stated that the Russians used 155 drones to attack the territory of Ukraine. And as of the Russian massive attack, the biggest number of explosions were recorded through the city of Odesa and the Odesa region. Here we have a video, massive attack by Russian drones, attack drones in Odesa, lots of explosions were recorded, but as of the morning of the 20th of May of 2026, we don't have enough of information to understand what exactly the Russians were attacking. Another important area is the city of Dnipro. As for this settlement, as you can see, we have lots of videos. The sources reported that the Russians destroyed a very big warehouse or an ammo depot in this area, and maybe even the Russians destroyed the government post office or a post office warehouse or something like this. This is the morning Dnipro, and as you can see, a very black smoke is rising from the territory that was attacked by Russians during the night. So here we have more pictures of the overnight attack. And as you can see, according to this picture, indeed something big was destroyed as a result of attack. And this is the situation already this morning, when most likely the fire was localized. We see that these special forces security rescue teams managed to stabilize the situation, and according to this video, it seems that indeed a warehouse was destroyed, or probably some post office building was destroyed, or something like this. And of course, the city of Kharkiv, another city that was attacked by Russians during the night. As of this territory, we have lots of videos of explosions, of grenade attacks, and the sources are saying that as for the city of Kharkiv, 100% sure the Russians destroyed a post office. So here we have the consequences of a warehouse belonging to the local post office was destroyed. So as we can see, both the Russians and the Ukrainians continue attacking each other, and according to statements that were made by Russians, the Russians don't see that the conflict is coming to a phase about when the settlement is possible. Both in the Russians and the Ukrainians continue attacking each other, and furthermore, we see that the geography of the Ukrainian conflict is getting bigger and is widening and spreading wider and wider. For example, today we received, or we continue receiving, updates about the Baltic states. Today, an air raid alert for drones has been issued in Lithuania. Due to the drone threat, residents of Vilnius County are urged to take shelter. A red alert has been issued in Vilnius County. Residents are advised to take shelter and wait for the alert to be cancelled. Residents of the Ignali, Odesa, and many other districts have also received warnings. I would like to remind you that these days we start receiving lots of updates about drones over the sky of the Baltic states. Everything started with the situation when the Baltic states allowed the Ukrainians to use their airspace to attack the territory of Russia, and this situation happened in April and March and probably the beginning of May of 2026. The Russians issued several warnings to the Baltic states authorities on this matter, and starting from the second half of May of 2026, more and more drones began entering the territory of the Baltic states of Ukraine's production, and of course these drones threatens the local security, and of course that is why we see that there is a sort of crisis in this area. But from the other side, we see that the population of the Baltic states is like being prepared before possible military confrontation with both the Russians and Belarusians. Now let's move further, and before we start discussing the situation on the ground, another important thing I would like to talk with you about is the Bureau 1440. So this is a very important situation. Today Bureau 1440 is implementing a new generation satellite communication system on high-speed trains. So we see that the Russians finished the creation of the satellite group of satellites, that low orbit group of satellites that according to Russians should provide the high-speed internet, and we see that the Russians began testing this system. But as you can see, according to this system, the Russians are going to test this satellite system not along the military forces or along the line of combat contact, but first the Russians decided to use trains, high-speed trains from different parts of Russia to test how satellites, how the internet works when high-speed trains move from one side to another. So the Russians, the next 6 months probably will test this system, and if everything is okay, only then the Russians will start providing these systems to the military forces and to the soldiers on the ground. But most likely by the beginning of 2027, lots of Russian soldiers and units, battalions, brigades along the line of combat contact will receive access to this internet, and of course from this perspective, from this situation, the Russians may start developing their offensives much faster than they can do this right now. Now let's discuss the situation on the ground, and first let's talk about the Zaporizhzhia direction. We received lots of very interesting updates. I would like to remind you that these days pro-Ukrainian sources report about a counteroffensive operation from the Ukrainian side, and as a result of this counteroffensive operation, the Ukrainians have almost completely restored the western Zaporizhzhia direction around the settlement of Stepnohirsk. Today we have additional changes on the ground. For example, this is the end of the 17th of May of 2026, this is the end of the 18th of May, and this is already the beginning of the 20th of May of 2026, and according to these changes, the Russians lost strong control over the main part of the settlement of Stepnohirsk, and currently the city of Stepnohirsk either under strong control of the armed forces of Ukraine or in the gray zone, which means that Ukrainians concentrated huge amount of forces in this area, and most likely the Ukrainians will continue their counter-offensive operation further in the southern direction towards the settlement of Kamenskaya. Furthermore, I would like to remind you that during the previous days we had a report that the Ukrainians announced evacuation from the cities of Dnipro and Marganets, and as we discussed during the previous videos, these two cities are located right in front of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power station, which means that everything is possible in this direction in coming days or maybe even hours. Another important thing is that today also Ukrainians announced the complete evacuation of the cities of Oleksandrivka, which is located right to the north from the area of the Ukraine's counteroffensive operation, and the settlement of Mykolaivka was also announced as area of complete evacuation. As of these cities, pro-Russian sources are saying that Ukrainians did this because the Russians are moving in this area, but if you ask my opinion, I believe that Ukrainians announced evacuation of these two villages because the Ukrainians are planning to deploy their troops and fresh forces in this area with the purpose to continue a counter-offensive operation through the western Zaporizhzhia direction towards the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power station. But as of the eastern or the northern Zaporizhzhia direction, probably the Ukrainians announced evacuation from this area also to deploy troops, but to support the Zaporizhzhia defense operation, which is ongoing right now to the east of the city of Orechov. So we see that the situation around the settlement of Zaporizhzhia continues deteriorating. Russians will continue offensive and the Ukrainians will continue their counter-offensive operation, and this battle will last for a very long period of time. Now let's move further and let's talk about the Kostiantynivka direction. During the previous 12 hours, additional changes were recorded through the eastern flank of the city, and it seems that the city of Kostiantynivka continues, the defense of the city of Kostiantynivka continues collapsing. These days we have lots of changes along the perimeter of the city, and it seems that the Russians are about to establish complete control through the eastern flank of the settlement, through the eastern parts of the city. We expect that in coming days we might receive additional changes on the ground exactly along this red line. As of the previous 12 hours, we have changes in this area. As you can see, the Russians improved their positions significantly through the village of Novodmitrivka and Mykolaivka, and it seems that in coming days, maybe even hours, the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation will confirm complete control over the settlement of Mykolaivka, and from these positions the Russians will continue offensive operation further in the northern direction of the city of Kostiantynivka with the purpose to encircle another contingent of the armored forces of Ukraine, which is located in the central and the southeastern parts of the settlement. The battle for Kostiantynivka continues, and as we can see, it seems that the Russians controls the initiative in their hands. Another important area is the northern direction. During the previous 12 hours, additional changes on the ground were recorded in this area as well. I would like to remind you that yesterday the Russians announced control over the settlement of Volokhovka. This information was confirmed both by video and by the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation report. And today we received additional changes along the settlement of Karayichna, and according to these changes, now the Russians began assault operation on the settlement of Karayichna at least from 3 directions, which means that in coming days the battle for this village also may end in Russian favor. Another important territory is the Sumy direction. Today, the group of forces north published another report about the situation on the ground, and according to this report, the clashes are taking place on the territory of Zaspilya and that the Russians continue advancing. In coming days, the Russians may take under complete control this village as well. We have covered most of the updates regarding the conflict on the territory of Ukraine, the situation in relations between Russia and China, and just a few words about the United States of America, because a very interesting process started on the territory of the United States. After 8 attempts, the US Senate has finally advanced a war powers resolution limiting military activities in Iran, passing it by a vote of 50 to 47. 4 Republicans voted in favor. So this is a very important situation. As of now, it doesn't mean anything. The President of the United States of America is still allowed to start the military operation against Iran. But now the Republicans and Democrats managed to launch a very important process through the Senate and through the Congress of the United States of America. And according to information we have right now, this resolution will now proceed to a full Senate vote. If it passes there, it moves to the House of Representatives, where it would need to pass as well. If both chambers pass it, it then goes to Donald Trump, who would almost certainly veto it given his position on the Iran conflict. To override a presidential veto, both the Senate and the House would need a two-thirds majority, a very high bar that would require a significant number of Republicans to break with Trump, which is considered unlikely given the current political climate. We believe that most likely this resolution will fail, but this is a very important political process that started before the beginning of midterm elections that are going to start very, very soon. And that's it for the short video. The Military with Summary channel remains to condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye-bye.